Hello everybody, my name is Joanna, and a couple of weeks ago I was home alone for like 4 days straight. I'm on summer break from college and I was on holiday leave from work, so I had absolutely nothing to do, especially because all of my friends were traveling. And that led me to do something that I don't usually do, which is binge watch an entire show, and that show was Yellowjackets. Now, I had heard of what Yellowjackets was. I have a lot of lesbian mutuals on Twitter, and although I thought generally that I would like it because my twin sister loves this show and we have similar tastes on a lot of stuff, I didn't expect to get so obsessed. I am simply obsessed. I am obsessed with the characters, with the theories, with the stupid writing decisions, with Christina Ricci as adult Misty, with the sapphic shipping. This show has been frying my brain and consuming all of my thoughts for the past weeks, and I knew I wanted to make a video about it, but there was one aspect of the show that was the one that interested me the most. When I told my sister I had watched the entirety of Yellowjackets in a day instead of sleeping and told her my general thoughts about the show, she let me know that the fandom is generally separated into people that believe the happenings of the show are supernatural and the ones that believe it's all real and not supernatural, and that things will be explained logically. And that made me want to rewatch the entirety of the show to keep track of every proof of whether the show was supernatural or not, if what happened to the Yellowjackets in the wilderness was supernatural or not. And so that was what I did. This is what this video is. I will presenting all science clues and my personal theories about whether what is happening in the show, what is taking place in the show is supernatural or logical. After that, I will give my opinion on whether I think it should be supernatural or not, because I do have an opinion, and whether I think the show is going towards a specific direction. And before we start, I have to mention that unfortunately I got really obsessed with the show a month before season 3 comes out, and I really wanted to make this video, so I will make a part 2 for this video after season 3 comes out and after I watch the whole thing, because there's probably going to be a lot more moments and things for us to consider. Maybe in season 3 they will reveal if the whole thing is supernatural or logical. Maybe we'll get that answer, I don't know. Also, I will try to make this video understandable if you haven't seen the show, but this is not a recap. I won't explain everything that happens in the plot. A lot of the things I'm going to tell you about the show are going to sound pretty wild if you haven't seen it. But yeah, this is also a spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about the entirety of the show, everything. If you want to watch it, go watch it. And lastly, Yellowjackets is a pretty dark show, so I'm going to give you a content warning. This video will have discussions of cannibalism, death, substance abuse, suicide, and mental health issues. I won't be too graphic, I won't show anything too graphic, but it's going to be there, so don't watch this if you think these are topics that could be sensitive for you. And okay, with all that said, I think this should be fun, so let's go! Hello everybody, so my name is Joanna, but I also like to be positive sometimes. First of all, what is Yellowjackets, in case you're one of the people that is watching this video not knowing anything about the show? Yellowjackets is a show that follows the story of a New Jersey high school soccer team in 1996. They are traveling to Seattle in a private plane to go to a national soccer competition, but the plane crashes in the middle of the Canadian wilderness and they spend 19 months there having to figure out how to survive. The show takes place in 2 different timelines. One of them is in 1996 during the crash, and the other one is in 2021, the present timeline, where the characters who have survived are adults, and it shows how their time in the wild has affected them. So now I'll give a brief introduction to the most important characters for this video. These are not all the main characters. I didn't talk a lot about the people from the present timeline because they are not as connected to the possible supernatural elements of the show, but these are the ones that are relevant to this video. The first one is Shauna, who has survived. She's one of the survivors. Shauna is pregnant with her best friend's boyfriend's baby, and she is married to him in the present timeline, yes. She writes journals, this is relevant to this video, and she is the one who skins and cleans and cuts the animals they hunt in the wild. I love Shauna. This is one of my biggest personality flaws, I would say, is that I love Shauna so much. She does so many horrible things throughout the show, and I still love her. I defend women's rights and wrongs when it comes to her, and it's all because Melanie Linsky was my first ever celebrity crush. So I have this bond to her. The only thing that made me waver a little bit in my support of Shauna's wrongs is that in the second episode of the first season, adult Shauna skins a bunny, and I have a pet bunny, so it wasn't a very nice thing to watch. But besides that, I love Shauna. The next one is Jackie Taylor. She is Shauna's said best friend, whose boyfriend is cheating on her with Shauna in the past timeline, and Shauna is pregnant with this person's child. Jackie, aka Snacky, that is because Jackie dies and she is the first person that they eat. She is the first victim of cannibalism. Yes, if you haven't seen the show has to do with cannibalism. Jackie is the first one. She's Snacky. She is the group leader / team captain of the soccer team. And she is just a girl. By that I mean that throughout the show, before she dies, people are like constantly annoyed at her because she's not helping that much while they are in the wild. You know, they are annoyed that she doesn't have a lot of survival instincts. So this is what I mean by is just a girl. Then we have Taissa, aka Tai. I think I will call her Tai multiple times in this video. So Taissa is super skeptical of the supernatural. She's like the main person who is following very much a logical viewpoint. She has these sleepwalking moments where she does dangerous or like weird things without realizing. It's not really sleepwalking because she's not always asleep when they are happening, but they call it sleepwalking because they don't know a better word to describe it. She does a lot of really weird things like eating dirt, and she keeps having visions of a creature that she calls the man with no eyes because he is a man who has no eyes. Yes, very creative. And also in the present timeline, she's running for Senate because she survived. I don't know if I said that she survived. The next one is Misty Quigley. Misty was in love with Coach Ben. It's actually Coach Scott. I was watching the show and I realized that I keep on calling him Coach Ben. His first name is Ben, but they call him Coach Scott because that's his last name, and I keep on calling him Coach Ben. So that's a mistake on my part. But yeah, in the teen timeline, she is in love with Coach Scott, aka Ben. She is desperate to have friends and feel included. This is her main motivation for everything, is she needs friends and to feel included. And she is crazy, but she is good at problem solving and has important skills for the wild. So this is Misty. Also, Misty, she has this other layer of being desperate to fit in and be a part of things because she was not even like an actual member of the team, of the soccer team. She was the person who, like, I don't remember her title, but she like distributed water and did this stuff. She wasn't like an actual member of the soccer team. So there's this other layer to her. Then there's Natalie, aka Ned. I don't know how to say her last name. Ned becomes the assigned hunter of the group in the wild with Travis, which is a character we'll talk about soon, because she knows how to use a gun, and she has a little romance with Travis in the wild, which is relevant because Travis dies in the present timeline, and most of her actions in the present timeline are related to that, are driven by Travis' death. Then we have Lottie. Lottie, her name is Charlotte. I was putting everybody's actual first name and not their nicknames because a lot of them go by nicknames. But Lottie only goes by Lottie. I don't think anyone calls her Charlotte at any point in the show. So yeah, Lottie has visions. And in the present timeline, she runs a cult where I'm sure she's selling like a bunch of MLM and like essential oils stuff. That really is her vibe, you know. Then there's Travis, whom I mentioned. He is the son of one of the coaches because there were two coaches in the plane with the team and one of them died, his dad, and the other one is Coach Scott, aka Ben. He has a younger brother, Javi, who is also in the plane. Javi is relevant, so that's why I'm mentioning that. He's also one of the hunters, along with Nat, and his actor is half Brazilian, and I have to mention that because I am Brazilian, and that matters to me. Then we have Ben, aka Coach Scott. He's the only adult who has survived, who is with the team, and he doesn't take part in any of the cannibalism, and he lost a leg during the crash, so he's pretty vulnerable to all these starving teenagers. He's also gay. I didn't write it down because it's not relevant to this video, but just so you know. The next one is Laura Lee. The most important fact about Laura Lee is that she is a Christian. This is like her big personality trait. And she has a teddy bear named Leonard. This is Leonard. Then we have Van, another one that I didn't put government name because it feels really weird to call her by her first name. But Van is Taissa's girlfriend in the 1996 timeline, and she almost dies because of fire and other reasons multiple times throughout their time in the wilderness. So I'm waiting for the season 3 arc where she actually dies because of fire, or not, because in season 2 she has, in the present timeline, she has terminal cancer. So we will see what will claim her first. some other characters that I'm going to mention by name. So there's Javi. Javi is Travis' younger brother. Crystal, aka Kristen, her real name is Kristen, but everybody thinks her name is Crystal, and she's too embarrassed to correct them. Crystal is Misty's friend in the second season, and she ends up dying because she falls off a cliff while having a conversation, a very tense conversation with Misty. I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but basically she dies technically because of Misty, and yeah, I'm going to mention her by name, so just so you know who she is. There's Mari. Mari is like, her personality is being kind of annoying and being mean, but in a fun way. I like Mari. And there's Akila. I like Akila. Akila has a baby nephew, and she brought her SAT prep book to the plane because she was, preparing for her SATs. So we don't know if she has survived. I don't think so. It's basically confirmed that she hasn't. But if there's someone that I wish has survived and we don't know that they have survived yet, I hope it's Akila, because I want her to play with her baby nephew again. I want it. And also, what else is... Oh, yeah. She stitches Van's face after she gets almost eaten by a wolf. And she also helps Shauna give birth to said child that she's pregnant with. So that's I think she would be a good doctor. I'm rooting for Akila's life. Anyway, another relevant thing is this symbol here. This symbol is in a lot of places of the forest that they are lost in. So there's in trees, in a lot of trees, there's in a cabin that they find. There's this symbol here. And also in the present timeline, some of the characters get these postcards with the symbol, blackmailing them, and we still don't know who sent these postcards. It is implied that it was Shauna's husband. It's this whole plotline. It has nothing to do with what I'm talking about now. It is implied that it was Shauna's husband because he was blackmailing some of the present timeline Yellowjackets, but they never really confirm it, so I'm waiting for a reveal that it was not Jeff, it was someone else. But yeah, anyway, the symbol is relevant. We don't know what it means yet, although there are some very fascinating theories about it. I guess you could say there are many angles to consider. If you know, you know. And okay, now that we know all of our players, do you get my joke? I called them players because they are a soccer team. Anyway, now we know all of our players. I'm going to begin talking about the actual stuff, all the actual proofs and theories. Let's go. So first of all, the cold open. The cold open of the show in the pilot, we see a girl that we don't know, and we cannot see her face, and she is running away from something, and then she falls in a pit full of spikes and gets impaled while a bunch of creepy masked figures, like this one here, appear. And throughout the episode, we get a lot of scenes of these people in the mask. This is taking place in the wild, including one of them that is in a mask with these antlers that kind of look like a deer. The fandom calls this mysterious figure the Antler Queen. She will be relevant. And so the characters in these masks are cooking and eating the flesh of this girl that fell in the pit. And although this whole scene has very ritualistic and creepy vibes, there's nothing full-on supernatural going on, but it looks like some sort of ritual. It's very... The whole scene is kind of weird. It's the first point that shows that at some point the Yellowjackets are going to turn into cannibalism, because this turn only happens in season 2, episode 2. So throughout the first season, there's only some hints that they were cannibals, and so this cold open serves to show us that at some point they will engage in that. And the last shot of the episode actually reveals that one of the masked people is Misty, so we know for sure that Misty is participating in cannibalism in the past. After this final shot of Misty, we see Shauna in the present 2021 reading one of her old journals. I'm really sorry for the terrible picture I got of the journal. I know it's really bad. I had to take a picture of my TV because you cannot take screenshots of Netflix. Her diary is really zoomed in, so you cannot see everything written on it. But some words that you can making out is all trying to people survive in the... I don't know if you can read this. Are we all trying to survive people in the... Remember these words. So this is implying that Shauna was writing about what they had to do to survive in the wild. And that, I think, contrasted to the scene we just watched of the ritualistic cannibalism going on with these words about survival showing up. I think it's supposed to plant this first seed of doubt we have of whether they did this cannibalism for supernatural reasons or for actual survival. One theory that is very used is that they had to give this supernatural framework to the cannibalism they were doing and had to see these acts as rituals because it was a way for them to cope with the fact that they did some pretty awful stuff, but we'll talk more about these later. Okay, second main point is Lottie's visions. So in the pilot and throughout the first couple of episodes, we see Lottie taking a medication called loxapine. I don't know if you can read this, but it's loxapine. Now, there isn't an actual medication in the real world called loxapine. There is one called loxapine, and it is a medication for schizophrenia. This is implying that Lottie has schizophrenia, which would make sense because, as I mentioned in her character introduction, Lottie has visions. So just an important note that I want to make before we continue is that the show only calls Lottie schizophrenic once. It is Van in the present timeline saying that to like discredit Lottie's visions. And I'm just mentioning this because I think it was better like in the first season where they just leave things for implication, because putting an actual name to Lottie's condition that is kind of portrayed in this very supernatural light in the show can be kind of stigmatizing to people who actually experience schizophrenia in the real world, and it does not represent well the illness. I think I'm not schizophrenic, but it feels kind of insensitive. But I think the reason why they didn't name it at first was because they wanted to have this ambiguity of, is Lottie just schizophrenic or does she see the future? Because yes, her visions are not just she is like seeing things, like having hallucinations, she is predicting a lot of future things. In episode 2, Lottie, the crash happens and Lottie goes to find her pills, and she counts in her hands how many pills she has, and it's only a few, and she takes the last one in episode 3. And it's in episode 3 that she starts having actual frequent visions and hallucinations. In episode 3, they are in a lake, and Lottie sees something that no one has seen, and they realize it's a cabin and on top of a mountain, and they go there and they stay at the cabin. But the point is that no one but Lottie had seen the cabin, and when they arrive there, Lottie doesn't want to enter the cabin because she's having bad feelings about it. And then we learn that there is a corpse inside the cabin, so her intuition was correct on that. And also there is that one symbol I showed inside of the cabin. I showed the picture of it inside of the cabin, so that's also something weird. Lottie is also the first character to notice the symbol, to see it in the trees. I think the first time she notices it is on episode 4 of the first season. She is the first one who takes note of it in the trees. And so although Lottie is like right about these senses that she's having and they aren't like full-on hallucinations yet, they did begin happening right after she stopped taking her medication. So there's this situation there. And the thing with Lottie being right about her visions, and I will talk about plenty more times where she's correct about them, it's that at first it's not like she's being super specific. Lottie does begin having more vivid hallucinations that are more specific as time goes on, especially beginning in episode 6. I'll talk about this soon. But before that, she's just having like feelings and like inklings that some stuff is wrong. And some people are just intuitive like that in real life. Episode 6 of the first season actually shows that Lottie has been having visions of the future and like having these, it's not exactly visions at first, she's not hallucinating, but she's having like vibes that things are going to happen ever since she was a kid. Like this is a scene where her parents almost got into a car crash and she was screaming because she was sensing that this was going to happen, and her parents take her to a doctor, and her dad is very like, she needs to get medicated, and Lottie has been medicated this whole time. So like these visions Lottie has been having are not like just tied to the wild. She has been having them ever since she was a kid. With that said, she can just be a pretty smart and like attuned person with what is going on and have pretty good instincts. There's a lot of people that think they can predict the future, but they just are noticing things and patterns, and they are very sensitive to the world around, and they think they are predicting the future when they're not. That's the whole point of introverted intuition in MBTI, isn't it? And she like can think that she's always correct about these visions because of confirmation bias. However, Lottie has been still kind of predicting the future even when she was on medication. Like this is a throwaway line Van has on episode 7 of season 1. She says that Lottie predicted prom queen last year. Like she was correct about who won prom queen. And the thing with that is, again, this can be that she has good instincts and she knows who is the most popular girl in school, and she has like the information to guess what will happen and she was correct. Or maybe Lottie has the gift of prophecy. That is the question. As I said, Lottie does begin having more like vivid hallucinations. It stops just being vibes and she begins actually seeing things. After episode 5, throughout episode 6 and 7 and the rest of the show, she's having way more vivid hallucinations. However, this can be because she has stopped taking her medication, and not only that, but it can have like side effects that can make her have more hallucinations. Following the show's logic, if she is schizophrenic, and she is stopping to take her medication and is in this very high stress situation, it's not surprising that she would begin having more vivid hallucinations and her mental health would worsen. So there is a possibility that this is not supernatural. With that said, this is just in the earlier episodes because as time goes on, Lottie's visions become a lot more specific. As Lottie spends more time in the wild, her whole thing goes from vibes and predicting things to having actual prophetic dreams and hallucinations. In episode 6, she has this vision of a deer, and right after that, they hunt a deer and they open it and it's full of maggots, and it's not a coincidence that the deer that she found had the blood in the antlers. And then she has a dream of a river of blood, and she tells the other girls about that because there's a little group of the girls who are walking to try to find help. They are trying to find something. They are walking to see if they find anything, and this group is made up of Van, Mari, Misty, Akila, and Tai. Lottie's like, I saw a river of blood, and they actually find a river that is red, and like they acknowledge that this river would be just very high on iron levels, which makes me want to drink this water because I'm severely anemic. But that's not the point. The point is that they do address that it doesn't necessarily have to be blood, but it's like very convenient that they found this red river after Lottie has a dream about it, you know? Also, Lottie, she is cleaning up the deer that is full of maggots that they cannot eat, and she finds one of its bones that isn't destroyed. The whole deer is like not in a good condition, but there's one bone that she keeps, and she gives it to Van and is like, wear this for luck and protection. And so Van is wearing that. I don't know if you remember the information I gave you, but Van is Tai's girlfriend, and Tai is super skeptical, and Tai is like making fun of Van because Van believes in Lottie's visions and her inklings. And at night when they are going to sleep during their expedition, Tai is like, I'm going to be the first one to keep guard, so she's not sleeping. But she wakes up in the middle of the night on top of a tree. She like fell asleep and now is in the top of a tree, and she is wearing Van's bone necklace that Lottie gave her. And when Van is not wearing the necklace, she gets attacked by a wolf, and it's pretty gruesome. She almost dies. They begin cremating her because they think she actually did die because of how badly injured she was. And it's kind of stupid because after that, they have to stitch her face after she's like not dead from the wolf. They have to stitch her face, and she only gets like 2 mild scars. Like, she should have a missing jaw, you know? Like, that was a very ugly injury for her to just have 2 scars. But anyway, that's besides the point. So this is the first example of one of Lottie's objects and weird rituals she does having an actual effect. This is something that happens a lot, especially from season 2. I'll talk more about Lottie's visions and the perception she has of them in the present later, but for now it's also important to reinforce that in the present timeline, both Ned and Van seem to think that Lottie's visions were just her schizophrenia. Van is the one who calls her schizophrenic in the present timeline, might I remember you, and Ned in episode 5 of season 2 tells people from Lottie's cult that Lottie is clinically insane and her delusions have hurt people. So basically, both Ned and Van think in the present that Lottie was not being correct and like having supernatural forces. And this is especially relevant because Van is Lottie's biggest follower in the wilderness. I'm not going to talk too much about this because it won't make sense up until when I talk a little later, but Lottie essentially begins a cult in the wilderness at some point, and Van is like her biggest follower, which makes sense because Van has gone through this experience of almost dying exactly when she wasn't protected by Lottie's deer bone. So like it makes sense that she would believe in this, but it's relevant because in the present she doesn't believe in Lottie anymore. So, okay, now there's the seance. I don't know how to say this word properly, seance. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Okay, so in episode 5 of season 1, Jackie has the brilliant idea of telling them to have a seance in the cabin because she thinks it would be fun. It's one of those like teenager things, it's normal. And so they all gather and they have the weird symbol from the cabin around, and they have candles, and Jackie is calling herself a French name, Jacques. This is relevant soon, but basically while the seance is happening, they're all asking like dumb little questions, and then Javi, Travis' younger brother, asks if they are all going to die there, and then the candles all go out because of a wind that blows that is very strong, and it like opens the window, and Lottie seemingly becomes possessed. She starts screaming, and she begins screaming in French. So I'm going to read where she's screaming. I don't speak French. Do you guys want to see my attempt? Let's see if I can say anything. So Lottie is like screaming, acting all possessed, and Tai says, Lottie, cut it out, this isn't a game. And then Lottie begins speaking French. She begins saying, Ce n'est pas un jeu. It's not a game. And then she says, Au début, il a pris soin de moi. Je l'ai nourri. Which, oh my god, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to every French-speaking person that is listening to me. But it is, at first, he took care of me. I fed him. And then she says, Il m'a apporté ses cadeaux. Les cadeaux de bois. He brought me his gifts. The gifts of the woods. And then she says, Mais il avait toujours faim. But he was still hungry. Mais après était, I have no idea how to say this, trop maigre. My offers were too meager. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Il voulait du sang. He wanted blood. Il veut toujours du sang. He always wants blood. And then she screams again. Il veut toujours du sang. He always wants blood. And then she screams. Il voulait plus de sang. He wanted more blood. And then Lottie walks to the window. And then she says, Le sang coule ici. Is this how you say this? Ici? I have no idea. The blood flows here. And then she starts pointing and she says, here. I'm going to stop speaking French now. And then she says, Il faut, you need. And then she speaks in English, you must spill blood or else. And so this is what she's saying while she's possessed speaking French. And so the girls use their basic French skills to understand her. They don't understand completely what Lottie's saying. And then Lottie bangs her head in the window and she kind of stops being all possessed. And Laura Lee actually bangs her head with the Bible, so that helps too. This is, in a supernatural sense, in my opinion, the beginning of the supernatural force that rings this show that they call the wilderness. That is the he that Lottie's talking about. And we learned later that the wilderness as this entity, I'll talk about it later, but we learned that it works through sacrifice, so it makes sense that it is talking about how the wilderness wants blood and that Lottie would have to bang her head in the window and cut her head to actually stop it. This obviously feels very supernatural, and it is what begins, it's like the shift that begins showing the show in this more supernatural side. I have more theories about this moment, but what is relevant now is that both Coach Scott and Laura Lee don't participate in the seance. This is going to be relevant to my theories later, so keep that in mind. Also, there's a theory that in this moment, Lottie was possessed by the spirit of the guy who used to live in this cabin that they found the corpse of, and that maybe that he was a francophone Canadian, because they are in Canada, and it would make sense why Jackie presented herself as Jacques when she began the seance, and why Lottie was speaking French. Maybe it was the person from the cabin telling them about the wilderness and about how the wilderness as an entity works because he knows. And okay, let's talk about this now realistically. Because although this scene does introduce some seemingly supernatural vibes, the only person who gets possessed is Lottie, the known unmedicated schizophrenic character. And they are in deep stress now, and she's like not taking her medication for a long time. Maybe going off of it could have these effects. So obviously she's very prone now to have more hallucinations. The only other physical manifestation of the supernatural in the scene that is in Lottie's actions that we know cannot be trusted to fully explain the supernatural is that Ben vomits while this whole thing is going on. But we learned that he vomits because Misty poisoned him because she wanted to spend more time with him. And also sometimes the window's open because of an air breeze, you know, like it doesn't have necessarily to be supernatural evil forces. It can just be the wind. Besides, it's very convenient that the language that Lottie begins speaking when she is possessed is French, a language that she coincidentally takes classes of. Jackie mentions Lottie takes French. Now, it is mentioned that Lottie is not very good at French, and Lottie is speaking fluently in the scene. But let's be honest, I'm going to go back to what she's saying. I don't think these sentences are that hard to construct. I think maybe there are some words that she wouldn't have known from a class in like a high school. Like, I don't know if she would learn the word blood or meager. I don't even know what meager means. But like, these are not crazy difficult sentences. She's not being required to say 75 I do not understand how French numbers work. I'm really sorry. You can be like, but Jackie said she's not good at French. And like, okay, that's fair. But also, Lottie is a character in a TV show. Her actions are written for a reason, and it's really convenient that the authors made sure to make a point that Lottie takes French classes. They could have picked a language for her to speak that she was not taught in any way. They could have her speaking Mandarin, and everybody could be like, she has never spoken Mandarin in her life. Or they could be like, Lottie doesn't take French. But they make sure to point out Lottie does take French. And here's the thing, guys. I only began putting an actual effort to learn English when I was like 12. And before that, from my classes from school, I was able to construct some basic sentences. I don't know if I would be able to say these things, but what I'm saying is that I think it is possible to learn some basics of a language in school classes. And maybe Lottie did, and she's just having a hallucination or something like that because she's unmedicated, and she began speaking French, which is a language that we know for sure that she takes classes of. Guys, something that was in my original script that I forgot to say for some reason is that I do think it is possible to learn the basics of a language with like high school classes of said language, but this is based on the English classes I had in middle school in Brazil. And obviously this was my experience. I had many different English teachers throughout my time, and a lot of the times I learned nothing with them. Like, it really depended on what my teacher was like, and most people don't learn much English in English classes in Brazil anyway. And this is me talking about my experience in the Brazilian education system. I have no idea how language classes work in the US, how her classes would go, what type of things she would learn, because I haven't taken those, so I might be wrong here. And also another thing is that, yes, it was a deliberate choice by the writers of the show to have her speak in a language that she takes classes of, but also, like, she's speaking French because, according to the theory that a lot of people have and that I agree with, is that she's being possessed by the spirit of the guy from the cabin, aka Cabin Daddy, as Jackie calls him. And so they had her speak French because of that, because he's a francophone Canadian. But also, there was no need to say that she took French classes. Like, there was no need for that, except that they maybe wanted to show that this might not be supernatural. So anyway, I just wanted to say this because obviously I don't know how her experience of learning languages in an American school would be like. Feel free to comment if you have experience on that. But I'm going to go back to the supernatural interpretation of the scene because I still have thoughts about it. So as I mentioned, I think this was the introduction of the wilderness as the supernatural entity in the show, and this is the wilderness as a force is more relevant to season 2. And I have a whole section dedicated to it, but I think that in this moment in this scene, this is the moment where they invite the wilderness in for the first time. This is something I'll talk a little bit more about later, but in season 2, episode 5, Ned from the present timeline says that they all, the survivors, have this darkness inside of them that is the wilderness. It's the implication. I think this seance was the moment that they invited this inside of them. And I say this because remember I said to keep track that Ben and Laura Lee did not participate in this seance. That's relevant. So Lottie was possessed by the spirit of the dead guy from the cabin, and after this episode, the characters, a lot of really weird things begin happening to the characters. First of all, I mentioned a lot that was beginning from episode 6, the episode after the episode of the seance, that is episode 5. The Lottie's visions went from being vibes, and maybe she sees stuff, but it's like very mild, to actually full-on hallucinations, and that are very prophetic. And also, the characters who were participating in the seance that almost die or actually die, they all seem to have a vision while they are dying, except for Laura Lee. Van almost dies by being attacked by a wolf, and she mentions to Taissa in episode 10 that when she was like in this in-between place, being dead and being alive, while they were cremating her while she was actually still alive, she saw something. We don't see what she saw, but she says she saw something. Jackie, when she dies of hypothermia, has a vision that she's being invited in. Shauna, when she's almost dying while giving birth, has a vision. And Travis, in the present timeline, dies because he tries to take his own life, but not exactly dying. He wants to be in this in-between place because he wants to talk to this wilderness. He unfortunately does end up taking his own life, but he was trying to be in this in-between place to have this vision, and all of them were in the seance, while Laura Lee, who was not, just dies. I don't think this is a coincidence. To be fair, this theory does kind of die down because we don't see Javi having any visions when he dies. Oh, I forgot to pass the slides, but you know, this is Jackie having her vision before dying, and this is Shauna waking up from her vision after almost dying. And now let's talk about Taissa's sleepwalking demons. Let's talk about it. As I mentioned, Taissa's thing is that besides being super skeptical, one thing that happens to her is that she goes on these sleepwalking states where she's not really conscious, but she's doing stuff, and during them she usually does some dangerous or weird things. I'm going to call her Dark Tai because I think it sounds ominous, but I don't think this force is totally malignant. I'll talk about it. So it's in episode 2 of the first season that we begin having some foreshadowing in the present timeline that this is going on, although we don't know it yet. So her son in the present timeline, he is a kid, he mentions that there's a woman who stays watching him in a tree during the night, and he like draws it. And I've seen theories that it was Dark Tai herself who drew these things because there's also a drawing of the man with no eyes. We'll talk about him. And her son, Sammy, wouldn't know the man with no eyes. But the point is, her son mentions that there is a woman who is watching him in the tree while he's trying to sleep. Episode 4 continues to show that because Taissa keeps on having these like weird states where she's not really conscious. She's like in this political event and she sees wolves. In episode 5, someone paints the word spill in Ty's house and she thinks it was her son, but it's not really a coincidence that the word spill was written in red in the same episode where they are having the seance in the past where Lottie begins screaming, "Spill the blood, you must spill the blood." So that's really relevant. But yeah, Ty thinks it was her son, her poor son, Semi. I feel bad for this child. Also, considering something that Dark Tai does later in the season, it's really relevant. It's really interesting that the word she chose to paint in the wall was spill and to give this like bloody image. But anyway, episode 6 is the first episode that shows Taissa having these sleepwalking states in 1996. And it is also right after the seance, exactly. So in this moment, Lottie wakes up in the middle of the night. Actually, I think she's not falling asleep because she has bad vibes about the cabin. And she goes outside and she sees Taissa eating dirt. And at first, it's supposed to be a little ambiguous because Lottie is having hallucinations. So you're like, was Taissa eating dirt? Does this make sense? But yeah, she was eating dirt in her like sleepwalking state. And in the present timeline, Taissa also realizes that she is the woman in the tree that has been watching her son kind of creepily. And also, her hand is bitten. Keep that in mind. I don't know if you guys can see anything. I don't think you can, but this is Taissa in the tree. I'm going to put the picture in the actual video if you cannot see it. But yeah, pretty creepy image for a child to be seeing. And here's the thing, guys. The show did show that Taissa stopped having these sleepwalking moments after they got rescued. And they only came back to her now in the present that she's stressed about the elections and also like worried about the Yellowjackets stuff. So it's kind of safe to assume that this is a response to stress that she has. It can be a response to the extreme stress and anxiety and trauma she suffered in the past. But yeah, sleepwalking can be caused by stress. Also, Taissa's behaviors are pretty self-destructive, and self-destruction is also a common response to trauma and stress. And also, her eating dirt is not that weird as it might seem. Some people, when they have nutritional deficits, which she probably would have considering they were starving in the wild, have this urge to eat things, and one of them is to eat dirt. This can happen. Now, to be fair, there is a moment where she is in the tree, that she is eating dirt in the tree in the present timeline, where we can assume that she is not starving like she was in the past. However, there is a scene where Taissa is like at this political event, and she refuses to eat a plate made of meat. Guys, I meant dish made of meat. I forgot that it's just in Portuguese that dish and plate are the same word. I'm sorry. So maybe this is implying that Taissa is a vegetarian. And, you know, I am a vegetarian and have just mentioned that I have anemia. So maybe she is just like me for real and has nutritional deficits because of dietary restrictions. Poor eating habits can lead to that. But now let's look at Dark Tai with a supernatural perspective. As I mentioned, Tai's sleepwalking behaviors only began in episode 6, which is the episode right after the seance. So still coming from the place of my theory that the seance was the moment that they invited the wilderness in, we can infer that these moments where there is dark Tai are the moments where the stress and the anxiety and also the trauma from what she is experiencing from the wilderness are bringing out these truest, sometimes evil form of her. Not always, but it is the truest form of her. And this is in my theory spectrum again. We've seen how aggressive Taissa can be to get what she wants. In the first episode, there's a scene where she's talking about freezing out one of the girls from the team, Allie, because Allie is a freshman and she's not that good and she would make things worse for them at nationals. And everybody's like, we shouldn't freeze her out. And Taissa was like, yes, because we have to win. And then when they are training, Taissa's being like super aggressive while training with her. And then she kicks Allie in the lection, and it is so strong, it rips her lection apart. It's like really ugly and gruesome. You can understand that as not Taissa necessarily wanting to hurt Allie. There's a possibility that she was trying to be more aggressive so Allie would play better. But also, she did get what she wanted, which was Allie not playing. So, she can be pretty ambitious and be pretty vicious to get these things that she really wants. Maybe Dark Tai is a reflection of these extremely ambitious side that Tai has, that she can control while living in civilized society, but she cannot repress in the wilderness. Other examples of things like that is that in season 2, episode 2, it's the first time they commit cannibalism. They eat Jackie, and in the next episode, they are dealing with the aftermath of what they have done, and Tai is like really shocked by what happened, and she's like, how could you? And then people are like, girl, you were eating Jackie too. And Van is like, you were eating her face. And then we realized that in the moments where Tai was taking part in the cannibalism, she was in her dark Tai form. It wasn't her like conscious mind doing that. Taissa, as a person, wants to keep this image of control, but dark Tai comes out when she wants to do actions that maybe she would be morally opposed to doing in real life, but still would want the consequences of. And again, it's really convenient that this begins happening after the seance. One relevant thing about the wilderness as an entity is that it requires blood sacrifice, not just blood sacrifice, but sacrifice in general, but blood sacrifice. Lottie screamed it a lot in French. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the actual wilderness, but this is relevant because in season 1, episode 10, we learn that Taissa sacrificed her dog to win the election. Yes, she gets elected as senator? Yes, senator. This is the word. Because she sacrificed her dog to the wilderness. Her wife finds this little altar that has the symbol and her son's doll. They're the head of their dog. And she won the election. And obviously this was Dark Tai's doing. Taissa sees the little altar. Later she finds it in season 2 and she's like horrified by that. She doesn't look like she did it consciously. And also remember that she had her hand bitten. It was her dog that she killed. Also, remember in episode 7 of season 1 in the 1996 timeline where Taissa makes fun of Van's necklace thing, deerbone thing that Lottie has given her because she doesn't believe in Lottie. And coincidentally, when Taissa wakes up and we realize that she was having one of her sleepwalking moments, that's why she was on the top of the tree at that moment, she is wearing Van's deerbone necklace and Van is being attacked by wolves. Now, I'm not saying Taissa caused the wolf attack or something like that, or that she was the wolf. This is a theory. No, I am a Tai Van shipper, okay? But I'm just saying that Dark Tai took off the necklace from Van because it was acting on this impulse that Taissa herself had of fighting against the supernatural. Another relevant thing about Taissa's character is the man with no eyes. This very cool guy here. I think I'm going to cut my hair like this. What do you think? I went to cut my hair, it's too long, I cannot handle it like that. So not all of Dark Tai's actions are like her acting on Taissa's impulses or doing things Taissa would want. Some of them are also related to the man with no eyes. The first time he gets mentioned is in episode 3 with a flashback to Taissa's childhood when her grandmother was in the hospital almost dying. So her grandmother is almost passing away and she sees the man with no eyes in the mirror and begins screaming, and Taissa looks and also sees the man with no eyes. And then during her grandmother's funeral, she sees that her pupils are wide, almost like she doesn't have eyes too. Woo! And in the wilderness, Taissa begins seeing the man with no eyes while she's sleepwalking. In episode 3 of season 2, Van is like following Dark Tai, and she learns that Taissa is following this figure that is the man with no eyes. And then Darktai also says that she only follows the man with no eyes when she lets me. I don't know if she was talking about Taissa letting Darktai take over her. I don't know, you can interpret that line. And Van asks who she is, and Tai doesn't answer, so there's an implication that it is Taissa. I don't know. And then they stop walking when they reach a tree with one of the symbols. So in the present, Taissa is also being haunted by the presence of the man with no eyes. In episode 5, she's going to do this speech that she's going to drop out of the elections because her wife asked her to do that because they have to take care of their son, who they think his mental health is not doing good because he's talking about seeing women in trees and he's fighting with kids. And also they blame Sammy, the poor kid. They blame him that he was one who wrote spill in the walls because Taissa hasn't realized that it was herself sleepwalking who did it. So she's going to drop out of the election. She doesn't do that, by the way. She goes against her wife's wishes. Not a healthy marriage. But anyway, Taissa is such a bad wife. Oh my god, I'm not even going to talk about it. The way I talk about Taissa, it might seem like I hate her. She's my favorite character, okay? I love her. I find her drama super interesting. I'm just making fun of her. Don't get offended. Anyway, what was I talking about? I remember. She's doing the speech, and while she's doing it, she actually sees the man with no eyes. And just throughout the whole season 2, Tai is like deeply disturbed by the idea of the man with no eyes and about how Darktai is taking over her more frequently. And okay, my explanation to the man with no eyes is pretty much only natural, it's not supernatural. Do you know how when people are dying, sometimes medical professionals talk about when people are dying, they like see things, have visions, this type of thing? I think probably what happened was Tai's grandmother was dying. She saw the man with no eyes because she was dying. And then she screamed about that, and that kind of traumatized Taissa, and she began associating this image of a man with no eyes to death and just overall anxiety. And so in these moments that she's very highly anxious and stressed out, they appear to her. I don't think we know enough of the man with no eyes yet to have a more compelling supernatural explanation. Obviously, the idea of having these visions can be pretty supernatural, like, oh, who is this figure? But we don't know enough about it, again, to have a better theory. So that's my explanation about him. Now, it hasn't been explained why the man with no eyes took her to the symbols in the tree, and also no eyes seems to be an overall imagery that the show uses to indicate death throughout it. This is not only the man with no eyes. We have Leonard, Laura Lee's teddy bear. What happens is in the second episode, right after the crash happens, Laura Lee goes running to find Leonard, her teddy bear, and he has lost one of the eyes, and there's blood dripping on him, and she looks up and realizes that it is blood from Coach Martinez, Travis, and Javi's dad. He has died. And then in season 2, episode 8, the queen card that they use to see whose person will be killed. I will explain this if you haven't seen the show. I know it sounds a little wild that I'm saying it, but yeah, they have this queen card that, might I remember you, was Javi who brought it with him after being gone for God knows how many months by himself in the wilderness and not speaking anything because he's traumatized or something. But he brings this card. They use it to, the person who draws this card is the one who is supposed to die, and her eyes are scratched out. So the image of missing eyes seems to represent death in the show in general. This is not a theory or anything. Like, I don't think there is anything supernatural to this. I think it's just imagery. It's just something I realized. Okay, let's talk about Lottie as a cult leader. And I put this image here because my sister is a big shipper of Lottie and Laura Lee. So this is for all the other fans too. Lottie was always the character who was the most attuned to her surroundings. Like, besides her visions, as I said, she was the first character to see the symbol in the trees in episode 4 of season 1. I definitely don't think that was a coincidence. And also after the seance, I think this was the moment they let the wilderness in, and it's not surprising that it possessed Lottie, the guy from the cabin, as the theory suggests, possessed Lottie because she is the one who was the most attuned to it. And after this, Lottie's visions begin getting worse. She begins having full-on hallucinations. Most of them are prophetic, and she becomes almost this religious figure to the other characters. I wouldn't say almost. She is a religious figure to the other characters. So you might think, okay, Lottie has powers. They are using these prophetic powers. It makes sense that people would look up to her in this way. But also, might I remember you that episode 6, right after the seance, right after her hallucinations begin getting worse, this is the first time her visions get validated by someone, and that someone is Laura Lee. So Lottie goes to talk to Laura Lee, who's a Christian, and is like, I'm having hallucinations, and Laura Lee is trying her best to comfort Lottie, and it's like, in the Bible, people have visions when they are being told something by God, and Lottie is scared of her visions. Obviously, it must be really scary, the situation she's in. So she's like, can you baptize me? Because she now sees her visions not anymore as hallucinations she's having because of schizophrenia, but she's seeing them as this spiritual thing, because Laura Lee told her that in the Bible this is how visions are seen. And so for the first time, Lottie is not seeing her hallucinations as something clinical per se, but as something sacred. Not necessarily Christian, like she does get baptized, but she never talks about the Christian God again, so I don't think she was actually becoming a Christian, you know. But the fact that she begins seeing her visions as these spiritual things can only make her more delusional and paranoid from now on. It's almost like this spiritual explanation, it is what is making her justify her own hallucinations, which obviously is something that is bringing her comfort at first, because before that she thought she was going crazy, so obviously that must be really scary for her. Episode 7 begins with Laura Lee asking Lottie why she won't tell the other girls about her visions, and Lottie says that it's because the other girls would think she's crazy. And again, this is showing again how Laura Lee is fitting to Lottie's delusions. Obviously, Laura Lee is not doing this with any malicious intent. She genuinely thinks these visions are a message from God and that Lottie is helping them. And Lottie is also desperate to have an explanation for what is going on with her. So it makes sense that this is something they would cling to. But in a rational sense, this means that I think Lottie's hallucinations begin getting definitely worse after the episode 6. Not only because she's stressed and unmedicated and, you know, starving and just not in a good mental health in general, but also because her visions are being validated. Her paranoias are being validated, so they're growing stronger. And, you know, at first Laura Lee, but then Van, who becomes Lottie's follower, and the other characters who begin bate palma, I don't know how to say this in English, that dão trela. How do I say this in English? That are giving credit to Lottie's visions. This and the moments where Lottie is actually correct about the things she sees, this is all confirming to her in her mind that she's correct, which is only making her think that she's seeing things and feeling things that maybe she's not, that she's feeling these big, great things that maybe she isn't. Like the wilderness being an entity. This is something that begins with Lottie. And not only that, but the characters are really clinging to what Lottie's saying, because they are projecting their own like fears and desires and anxieties onto Lottie. And she's becoming this kind of like symbolic scapegoat for all of their fears. This happens all throughout season 2, but one specific example that comes to my mind is in episode 6 when Shauna is giving birth, and it's being very dangerous. They are very worried and anxious about it, and Lottie makes everyone hold hands and share their hopes. And Lottie seems to be doing this because she wants everybody to calm down and to not be anxious. And people like validated Lottie's hallucination so much out of this need. They needed her to be correct because it was something that brought them comfort, and she sort of became this religious figure to them. This happens, I noticed a lot too in season 2, episode 3, when they are having a baby shower, and Lottie gives Shauna a baby blanket with the symbol from the trees, and Shauna is like mad at her because Shauna doesn't believe in this whole cult thing yet, and she screams. She's like really annoyed that Lottie's playing God. This is what she says, that Lottie's playing God. So this is all just showing that not all characters are in Lottie's cult at first. But then exactly there, Shauna's nose begins bleeding and a bunch of birds die. And Lottie tells all the girls that believe her in this as this religious figure to go gather its blessings, aka get the birds so they can eat them. And in the present timeline, in episode 4 of season 2, Lottie is in her cult, and she has like bees in her little cult, and she takes them out, and there's a lot of blood on them, and she begins crying because there's blood in her bees. And then she hears someone saying in French, "He wants blood." I'm not going to repeat in French, "He wants blood." I'm going to spare you of that. But she begins hearing that, and then we realize that this was all like a hallucination, and there wasn't any blood or anyone saying he wants blood. So either this is Lottie in the present having the wilderness inside of her still and still having these hallucinations and things going on. Or maybe it is because in the present, Lottie, instead of, being medicated, is doing yoga and doing meditation, which I don't think can cure schizophrenia. There are other moments where they use Lottie as this scapegoat religious figure. There's a lot of moments throughout season 2 that Lottie helps people calm down. She's like a naturally caring person, I think, and she genuinely wants to help them. But this is something that is kind of hurting her because she is being validated on these things that through these skeptical lenses are not true. She is delusional, and people are keeping the delusion because it helps them deal with what is happening. And this actually also happens in season 2, episode 4, where they have this discussion where her supporters are like talking about how they only had food because of Lottie, because Lottie found the birds. She sends the birds, and also there was a bear that she killed in episode 9 of season 1 in Doom Coming. Actually, I think it was in episode 10, but it was right after Doom Coming. There was a bear that was acting kind of weird, and Lottie killed it. So they had food because of Lottie, and they actually have Lottie and Ned have a competition of who can get more food. Ned, the hunter, or Lottie, the girl who is doing blood sacrifices and cannot defend herself. I wonder who will win. No one wins, by the way. None of them catch anything. And they have a very, I kind of ship it moment later. So basically, the characters need to see Lottie as this religious figure because they need reassurance and a sense of control. I will talk more about this later when I talk about the wilderness as an entity. And Van ends up being Lottie's one of her most devoted followers, I think, because she has gone through so many almost death moments and so many situations like that where she needs this sense of assurance and control that Lottie's providing them. And Misty wants to be included. This is a picture from a ritual they do at the end of season 1 in episode 10, and Van is there because she believes in it. Misty, I don't know if she believed in the wilderness this whole time or if she was just there because she wanted to feel included. Guys, I don't think Misty believed in the wilderness, and she definitely doesn't believe in the whole thing at all in the present timeline. I just think Misty has homicidal tendencies. Like a lot of the other characters, when they start, killing for ritualistic purposes, I fully believe that they believed that what they were doing was actually happening, that they believed in the wilderness, that they really thought these rituals made sense. With Misty, I just think she wanted to kill people. And I have a theory that she is a serial killer in the present timeline and we just haven't learned it yet because this girl knows so much about how to deal with murders, as we see how she deals with Adam. And obviously she's a nurse, but being a nurse and being really into true crime doesn't mean that you know exactly what to do to hide a body, And not only that, but she has that basement where she is keeping Jessica, how do you say this, hostage. And why does she have that basement? That is weird. I think she really kills for fun, and she just joined the hunts not for religious reasons like the other characters, not for spiritual reasons, but because she wants to kill people. That's my opinion. Guys, I stopped to think a little bit more about this, and although, Misty being a serial killer is just a funny haha theory I have, I think it makes sense because there's that scene in late season 2, I think it's on episode 8 if I'm not mistaken, that the Yellowjackets are all reunited at Lottie's cult, and Misty begins reminiscing about the wilderness and their time in the wilderness. I think Misty is one of the characters who liked their time in the wilderness in the broad sense because it was one moment that she was totally allowed to act on her impulses. Lottie, in fact, did so well in her religious figure role that she, in the present, has a cult. Another thing is that I think in this video I just talked about Lottie's cult so much, like coming from the perspective that the people watching this video have seen the show and know what I mean when I say Lottie's cult. But in case you haven't watched the show, like obviously Lottie doesn't have a thing called Lottie's cult or something. She has this, how do I explain what it is? It's a treatment center in the middle of nowhere, and she has therapeutic activities going on there. There's meditation stuff, there's stuff with the goat, there's stuff that they do, not killing the goat. That is important. She runs a cult. So she liked it, I suppose. Guys, when I said she liked it, I suppose. It was kind of an oversimplification of what I think happened to Lottie. I think Lottie just really learned to feel useful and valuable in this field of helping people in these little ways that she finds useful, like through little rituals, or like when in her actual cult, through meditation and taking care of a goat. And so I think like it was less of a choice. This is like one of those things where like if someone tells you to become a writer and you write for them and they keep on telling you that you're such a good writer and that your writing is really helping them, you're probably going to continue being a writer, even if it's not the thing you loved the most or wanted to do the most before, because like you're helping people with your writing and people keep on telling you how good you are with your writing. But imagine that under the pretense that this is all based on some sort of delusion, like you're only a good writer because you have, I don't know, I this metaphor was really bad, this analogy was really bad, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't think this was 100% out of her free will to become a cult leader. And with all that said, as much as we can read through these lenses, we cannot lie. Lottie does have some pretty accurate senses of things. She does see things, and there can be a supernatural situation to this. It feels weird to not even acknowledge that a lot of her visions and her rituals working so many times. Like, she has this little ritual she does before Travis and Nat go hunting, and to keep them alive. And they are like, well, we don't know if this is actually working, but also Ned and Travis are going hunting in the middle of the snow and it's very cold winter in the wilderness and they haven't died yet. You could argue that it is working. So there is the supernatural side to that. Okay, now we have to talk a little bit about Laura Lee's death. Coach Scott, Ben, I wrote his name wrong and everything. I'm so stupid. And their first act of cannibalism. Did I spell I think I spelled cannibalism wrong there. I don't know. But anyway, we have to address this. I made sure to point out that Coach Ben and Coach Scott, Ben, I'm going to call him Ben, it's easier, that Ben and Laura Lee did not participate in the seance because I think this is relevant to my theory that the seance was the moment that they invited the wilderness in, because I think none of them, Laura Lee or Coach Scott, invited the wilderness in. In case you don't know, Laura Lee dies because they find this old little plane in the forest and Laura Lee's like, I'm going to fly it. My grandfather was a pilot and there is an instructions manual here, so I might be able to fly it and get us help. And everybody's like, this is an awful idea, Laura Lee. And she's like, no, it is a good idea. And so she begins flying the plane, and there's actually some, tension about that because we don't even know if the plane works. It's like an old plane, old. But the plane does fly, and then when Laura Lee is up in the sky, the plane catches on fire and explodes, and presumably Laura Lee's dead. She might not be. I saw some stuff about how she will be in season 3. We don't know if it's flashbacks or what, so I'm looking forward to that. I loved Laura Lee. I hope she didn't die. But the point is, she died here. Presumably, they think she did. She probably did. Let's be realistic. She was in season 2 as a vision, so this might be what happens. But anyway, it's very easy to see how this happened because her whole plan was very flawed from the beginning. It was an old plane that she randomly found in the woods. She has no experience actually flying. She has no idea if the plane was actually working properly. She is a teenager with extremely basic knowledge of flying. It happened, but the thing that is interesting is that the plane began catching fire by Leonard. Laura Lee takes her teddy bear, Leonard, with her in the plane, and the first thing that catches on fire, it's not the engine or something like that, it's her teddy bear. That is a weird thing to happen, and maybe it was not just a natural thing. I saw some theories that maybe the wilderness is keeping them inside, is like stopping them from being able to escape, so maybe it killed her because she tried to go away. But we also have to talk about Ben, and to talk about him, we have to talk about their first act of cannibalism. So in season 2, episode 2, it's the first time the characters commit cannibalism, and what happens is that Jackie died in the ending of season 10. She froze to death because they expelled her from the cabin and she was outside in the cold and she died, and her body has been frozen for 2 months at this point because it's winter and they cannot bury her because they cannot dig the ground. Everything is too icy, and so they cannot bury her. And then after 2 months, where Shauna is like kind of talking to Jackie Jackie's dead body as if she's alive and also eating her ear. Yes. What happens is the characters decide to cremate Jackie, but instead of getting cremated, her body doesn't turn into ashes. Basically, while she's like in the fire, a bunch of snow falls on top of her, and instead of her turning into ashes, she cooks. She like becomes cooked. And all the girls are starving and kind of delirious, and they end up eating Jackie because they are desperate for food. Obviously, the supernatural explanation here is that Jackie's body didn't turn into ashes because the wilderness didn't let it happen, and that they ate Jackie's body because they were delusional because of the wilderness. The wilderness was having them act on this awful impulse of eating someone. But the point is that Coach Ben, on the other hand, was not taking part in the cannibalism, and that he seems terrified by it. I don't know if you guys can see anything. I think I'll have to put these images on editing because I don't think you can see anything. Yeah, this is him, and he's like terrified. He sees the Yellowjackets eating Jackie's body, and he's horrified by it, and he doesn't participate. And that is because, according to my theory, that the seance was when they led the wilderness in, Coach Scott, Ben, was not there, so he doesn't have the wilderness inside of him, and he is horrified because he's not being taken by this evil force to actually go and meet someone. All of the girls are starving, including him. He's not the exception, you know, all of them are in extreme hunger. Like, Ben would have participated had it just been about hunger. However, we do have to address something. Coach Scott is the only adult here. He's the only person who has a developed frontal lobe. So being an adult, he's probably more likely to not be swayed by their impulses and by their bad ideas. He's never participating in Lottie's cult things. And also, he's terrified of them because remember I said Ben lost his leg in the plane crash, and so he's very vulnerable to these starving teenagers. When they begin killing people in rituals in the ending of the season, it's pretty implied that Ben is like certain he will be the next, and he's like worried about it. Also, Jackie's body, I looked up, and in order to cremate a body, you have to have very high temperatures. A campfire usually reaches 600 to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or in Celsius, if you're normal like me, it's 315 to 537 degrees Celsius, which would not be enough to turn Jackie into ashes. And it's possible, considering a pile of snow fell on top of her, that this was a natural thing that happened. Okay guys, it's time to talk about it. Let's talk about the wilderness as an entity. In episode 5 of season 2, Lottie in the present, Ned goes to her cult. Goes is a little bit of an understatement. She gets kidnapped by Lottie to go to her cult. And Lottie does this hypnosis thing with her, and Ned has a vision that is the plane crash side, but it's different because no one has survived. There instead is the Antler Queen, which is the figure that I talked about in the cold open. And then in the vision, Ned sees Travis, and she tells him, I saw it, I felt it, we brought it back. She is referring to this dark supernatural force that is really prevalent in their conversations in season 2 that I have been calling the wilderness as an entity. And the spirit of the wilderness, according to Ned, has been inside of them this whole time, and they have brought it back, which again, I feel like this happened in seance. They invited that spirit in the seance. And then Lottie looks at the ground after that, and she sees in her reflection antlers, like deer antlers. So this is implying that Lottie maybe was the Antler Queen. We have to wonder. The Antler Queen as a figure is basically a representation of what the wilderness is the person who speaks for it. And throughout these first episodes of season 2, it really is heavily implied that it is Lottie, because Lottie is the one that is the most attuned to the wilderness, and it's once throughout the show. However, that does change by the ending of season 2 when she passes the title kind of symbolically to Nat. But anyway, I think a lot of what we know of the wilderness as an entity was pretty much all said by Lottie when she was possessed in French. I'm not going to speak French again. I'm going to just read the translations. He brought me his gifts, the gifts of the woods. This is referencing all the things the woods have given them throughout this time. And then, but he was still hungry. My offers were too meager. I have to look up what meager means. Why didn't I do that before? Let's find out what meager means. Meager, lacking in quantity or quality. Okay, it's like little. It was too little. It comes from French. That is so cool. Meager literally comes from the word in French. That's so interesting. I'm sorry, I got really excited about it. After this whole ordeal, I also realized that this word is also the word for thin in Portuguese, came from the same root as both meager and the word in French, because thin in Portuguese is magro. in comparison to meager and mage. Like, I think it came from the same thing and I didn't realize, and I'm stupid. My offers were too meager. It was not enough. He was not offering enough. He wanted blood. He always wants blood. He always wants blood. He's saying that the wilderness needed a blood sacrifice and he was not doing enough. He was not giving enough blood. So yeah, the wilderness as an entity works through sacrifice, specifically through blood. I already mentioned Taissa sacrificing her dog to win the election, and it worked. So it means that the wilderness as this force is so present in them, even in the present timeline. In season 2, episode 6, when Shauna is giving birth, Lottie and everyone, they're also worried that Shauna is not going to make it, that she and her believers make sacrifices for her to survive. And after this, Lottie says to everybody, the wilderness respects your sacrifice. This is not the first time she has sacrificed something to the wilderness. It has been happening all throughout season 2 and at the end of season 3 and at the end of season 2, I'm sorry. But it is the first time that she is acknowledging, oh, we are sacrificing this for the wilderness. This is what is going on. And still in episode 6, in the present timeline, Lottie is in therapy and she's defining the wilderness to her therapist, and she's like saying the wilderness was like the god of that place. She also says that she thought this thing would leave them behind after they were rescued, but it didn't. And this whole therapy scene is really interesting because later we find out later in the season that Lottie has been hallucinating her therapist. She has no therapist, and her therapist had been saying, you should embrace the wilderness, you should embrace this. And in season 2, episode 8, Lottie also talks about how they all have the wilderness inside of them and they have to give it what it wants. Obviously, this is a reference to blood sacrifice. And okay, if you haven't seen the show, what I'm about to tell you is a little crazy. Not a lot, because I think it makes sense with what the show has been building up to. But starting in season 2, episode 8, the characters start using a deck of cards that they have been using to choose what chores each person will do. They start using it to decide who will be sacrificed to the wilderness. I'm not kidding. They do these rituals where someone draws the cards, and if you draw the queen card that Javi has brought, you are the one that have to die. And they do this ritualistic thing where they like hunt you like you're an animal. And the person who draws the queen card in the past timeline is Nat, and she runs away, obviously, because people are trying to kill her. They are running behind her. But then what happens is they reach this frozen lake, and Javi, who is Travis' brother, and remember, Travis is kind of like Nat's boyfriend, kind of. I don't know if they would consider each other that. They are kind of dating, and Javi is trying to help Nat. He's trying to help her run away. But what happens is Javi ends up falling in the frozen lake, and Nat is trying to save him, but Misty screams for her to stop, and Van says the wilderness has made its choice. They fully believe that Javi dying would make more sense than Nat dying now, because it is what is supposed to happen, Van is saying. I'll talk more about the scene later. And they end up sacrificing Javi and eating him. They eat this poor boy. He's like the youngest person there. I think he's like supposed to be 13 or something. And they eat him. And Travis eats his heart. It is relevant that Nat was one who drew the queen card first, because even though she didn't die in the wilderness back in the day, in season 2, episode 9, they have a hunt in the present time. And Nat is the one who ends up getting killed. So it's through, like, it's kind of convoluted. She wasn't going to die until she did die. But it's interesting because even though they thought she had escaped to the wilderness, she didn't. She died just 25 years later. And technically speaking, Javi's sacrifice to the wild, this blood sacrifice, did provide them food. Like, they did eat Javi and didn't starve to death like they were about to. So, and in the beginning of season 2, before they actually start killing people, Lottie's doing a lot of rituals, weird little rituals for the wilderness. I talked about the one she did to Nat and Travis for them to be safe while hunting. So she has been doing this, but now it's blood sacrifices like they are supposed to. In season 1, episode 9, Doom Coming, this is before they start practicing cannibalism and Jackie's still alive, they decide to throw a party that they call Doom Coming. And Lottie is wearing this crown that kind of looks like antlers, so that is relevant. Basically, in this party, Misty drugs everyone. She was trying just to drug Coach Scott, aka Ben, with mushrooms, but she accidentally gets everyone high. And this is relevant because a lot of really weird things happen in this episode. For example, something that happens is that Jackie has sex with Travis because she doesn't want to die a virgin. This is such a stupid thing to be worrying about. But anyway, she has sex with Travis, and this is a huge deal because Travis has been kind of dating Nat to this point. I think they had an argument a little bit before that because Travis is a little bit of an asshole. After they discover this, Lottie tells Jackie that she took something that didn't belong to her, and then Jackie answers with, oh, what, like the fucking spirits give a shit that Nat called dibs on Travis? I don't know what calls on dibs means, what this expression means, but you know, Jackie's kind of making fun of the idea that there is a supernatural force being mad at her, and Lottie answers that it has nothing to do with that because Jackie doesn't matter anymore. And I remember when I watched that, I just thought it was an odd thing, but then I realized that this was maybe showing that Lottie was feeling that Jackie was about to die, because Jackie dies in the next episode. So maybe this was Lottie feeling like that would happen, and maybe this ties to my theory that maybe Jackie's death was connected to the wilderness and not just dying of good old hypothermia, because throughout this whole episode it seems like Lottie is speaking for the wilderness. She is becoming the antler queen and speaking the needs and wants of the wilderness for the first time. Even when she is saying that Jackie took something that wasn't hers, like, I don't think Lottie was that close to Nat this far. Like, she shouldn't be this mad for the situation. Like, Nat is the one who should be hurt, and you know, and she is so invested in this, so it almost feels like something the wilderness would care about and not necessarily Lottie. Actually, I think she was close to Nat, and I just said something stupid. I'm sorry. Also, Lottie says during the party that they won't be hungry for longer, and it's later in episode 10 that they have the bear, that it's a weird acting bear that is very gentle, and there is like a skeptical explanation for that. That could be, you know, the bear is also probably starving because they're all starving, they cannot find anything to hunt, and that is probably causing it to act weird and submissive. But anyway, there is the supernatural explanation that how did Lottie knew that they wouldn't be hungry anymore, and she also killed the bear. And again, back to my personal theory that maybe the wilderness had something to do with Jackie's death, simply because, again, Lottie seemed to be aware that Jackie was about to die, and not only that, but Jackie kind of mocked the wilderness in this moment. She was clearly, when she said that line that I don't know what the main expression that gives meaning to that sentence means, but the point is, she says that line that is clearly trying to, like, mocking the idea of this wilderness, this spirit. And so maybe the wilderness had a hand in killing Jackie. And so as you can see, there are many of these little things that make it plausible that the wilderness is actually a supernatural entity force. But let's also look this in a rational sense, because I think this is pretty interesting and pretty explainable. I mentioned earlier while I was talking about how Lottie became this cult leader that the group seems to be relying so heavily on her role as a religious leader because it's something that is bringing them a minimum sense of control and certainty. Lottie was the one who began the idea of the wilderness as a force. She was the one that began the sacrifices, and even the first hunt for people where they kill Javi, it was kind of started because of her. It wasn't her own action. Lottie, I didn't talk about this, but Shauna punched Lottie so hard, so many times, that Lottie almost died. She's really sick. It's an awful scene, really awful scene. But basically, Lottie is extremely weak. They think she's going to die, and they decide to do this hunt because they need to feed the wilderness to get something because Lottie's dying. So it wasn't Lottie's act exactly, but it was driven by the ripple effects of Lottie's actions before. And it's not that it's her fault. She is the scapegoat, as I've said. The wilderness, as this entity, is the only thing that is bringing them any sort of certainty, and they use it almost like a coping mechanism to cope with the awful things they did, because they did a lot of really atrocious things in the wild. When they are doing the hunt and Javi falls in the frozen lake and Ned is trying to save him, as I said, Misty tries to stop. She actually stops Ned from saving him, and Ven says the wilderness chose because she's trying to rationalize this choice they just made to let this teenager die for their own sake, to eat him to survive. They're trying to rationalize that. And again, Lottie ends up being this scapegoat because she is the one who represents the wilderness to them. Even in the present, Taissa has sacrificed her dog to win the election, and she did win, but like, where's the proof of that? How can we be certain that it was the wilderness that made her win? Like, we cannot know for sure. Lottie and Ned talk in the present about having this darkness inside of them, but have they considered that it could be just trauma? They seem to be putting this supernatural lens over the things they did, so it makes them feel less worse about it, which is not something that they are doing as much in the present. A lot of the characters are not doing as much, like Van, who is saying that Lottie is schizophrenic, and Ned is saying that Lottie's delusions have hurt them, and now they are having to deal with the consequences of the awful things they did in the past. This is a religion to them, and they have to believe it. The way the characters like deal with the idea of the wilderness and the way they interact with it is probably a very interesting part of the show. It's one of my favorite ones, actually. I think it's super compelling, and it's interesting to see the show as this study of how religions are born and how people operate under them. I think that's very interesting. And you know, when they eat Javi, they, in this skeptical, logical way of thinking, they are driven both by this religious certainty aspects, but also because they are obviously starving, they are not doing well. I think this is something that people can forget watching the show because they don't look like they are starving. Like, they should be a lot skinnier and low energy and have awful skin, which they don't do, but they are all in an awful condition. So, okay, talking a little bit about the sacrifices to the wilderness in season 2 episode 6, as I've mentioned, they do a little sacrifice to save Shauna and potentially her baby while she's giving birth. And we have to acknowledge that this ritual doesn't really work. It works if you understand it through the lenses of they want Shauna specifically to live, but the baby doesn't survive. So this is one of those things where, like, maybe the rituals are not really working, or maybe the wilderness works in mysterious ways like the Christian God does. And the second thing is Crystal. In episode 7, they do this chant to try to find Crystal because Misty, she didn't directly kill her, but you know, Crystal is missing because of Misty. I mean, she kind of killed her. Kind of. I don't know. But yeah, Crystal is dead, and they don't know where she is, and they think she's just missing. And so they are doing this chant to try to find Crystal, and they don't find Crystal. And actually, her body has been moved. It's not where Misty left it. So I'm excited to see where she is. So interestingly, in season 2, episode 9, it's an episode where they decide to have a hunt in the present timeline, 25 years later, and it's Lottie's idea. And when she tells them about it, Taissa and Shauna humor the idea despite not really taking it seriously, actually, because they see Lottie's belief in the wilderness as the way she's finding to cope with the awful things they did. They don't believe this in anymore, and Shauna clearly doesn't believe in it anymore, but Lottie does, and this matters to her. Misty suggests that they should call Lottie's doctor team instead, and Van responds with, like, this isn't just about Lottie's illnesses, it is about what we went through. And, you know, later when the hunt is actually happening, Taissa calls Lottie's psych team off, and when they ask her what she did, Van answers that it wouldn't be fair to her because they did this to her. This moment is Van acknowledging, as Lottie's biggest follower in the past, acknowledging that having used Lottie as this religious figure was detrimental to Lottie because Lottie believed in these things that they don't even believe anymore, that were really harmful to her, and that fed off her delusions and her hallucinations that were not real, all because they needed that certainty. In the same episode later, Shauna says it wasn't the wilderness, it was us, and Lottie answers with, what's the difference? Which is sort of the whole point, I think. And okay, the last thing I have to address is Shauna's visions and just the characters' visions in general. Throughout the whole show, Shauna keeps on seeing Jackie, the ghost of Jackie, her dead best friend, and she like talks to Jackie's corpse before they cremate her and eat her. But it's easy to explain that, I think. And also the other characters all throughout season 2 are having all types of visions. Shauna has a lot of visions of Jackie in the present too, and I think this is easy to explain. First of all, in the past, she was starving and feeling really guilty over Jackie's death because Jackie died because she was expelled from the cabin in a very cold night that it snowed, and she died of hypothermia. And it all began because of an argument she had with Shauna, and Shauna was the one who expelled her, so Shauna feels really guilty over Jackie's death, and this is basically a manifestation of her guilt. Even in the present, she feels super guilty about it and keeps on seeing Jackie throughout it. I've read that it's common sometimes for people when they are still grieving to see people that are dead, because it's their brain, their grieving brain, and I don't think Shauna ever got over Jackie's death, because obviously you don't get over someone's death, but she was never able to move on from this because she blames herself so much for it. But also in season 2, as I said, a lot of the characters are having visions throughout it, are having hallucinations. The main one that I want to address is Aquila, because Aquila has a mouse that I don't know if you can. This is such a poor image, like poor quality image. I don't think you can see it, but she has a mouse, and she doesn't want anyone to see that she has this pet mouse that she talks to, because obviously they're all starving and they would want to eat the mouse. And later we learned that she has been hallucinating the mouse all along, and the mouse was dead. It was just a skeleton of a mouse, and she thought it was an alive mouse. Another thing is that Mari keeps on listening to this dripping sound, and they don't know what it is, and she keeps on listening to it, and other people begin listening to it. But I think that this is easily explainable, both in the supernatural and the logical sense. In the supernatural, obviously it's the wilderness playing tricks with their mind, but in the rational sense, it's kind of obvious that they are starving, very stressed out, and obviously you can have hallucinations under these conditions, so that is pretty easy to explain. And so guys, what is it? What are my thoughts? I think the ambiguity between what's real and what's supernatural is kind of integral to the core of what Yellowjackets as a show is. And I love that the show even shows this duality between the characters that believe in the supernatural and the ones that don't, and how their vision changes throughout the time. I think this is one of the most compelling aspects of the show. I used to be such a strong supporter of the skeptical side, because I began watching the show thinking it was a normal survival horror show. I didn't think it was going to be anything besides that, and when they began introducing supernatural elements, I was annoyed. I sent voice messages to my friend who is really into the show too, being like, I'm annoyed that there are supernatural things. I wish there weren't. And I think it is because this is a psychological horror show, and I'm just not scared by supernatural things. I'm just not. I don't care. It's not scary to me. These things don't exist in real life. Supernatural elements don't scare me like trauma does. But rewatching the whole show to try to figure out whether it's supernatural or not, it made me realize that this duality is kind of the whole point of the show. There's a reason why they don't commit to either. And although I think season 2 has a lot of stupid writing moments, although most of them are from the present timeline, I think the best timeline is mostly the same quality as season 1, but oh my god, present timeline is struggling in season 2. I commend the show still for sticking to the bit and what they are trying to do. I think a reason why a lot of people didn't enjoy season 2 as much, me included, is because it made us realize that maybe the show wasn't as planned as we hope it would have been. I think Elijah Wood's character in the show is so stupid. His whole thing, his existence is so stupid. But the blend between natural and supernatural, of skeptical and supernatural, is kind of the whole point. Now, do I think this approach is flawless? No, I don't think it is. As I mentioned, I was a strong believer of the skeptical side, and it is because I think that when you begin introducing supernatural things, or that might be supernatural, and you don't actually name them or don't acknowledge them, this can lead to things feeling like they don't have an effect anymore. We don't understand what are the clear, fantastical rules of this universe, so things might not be offhand. What I mean by that is that by not knowing what can and cannot happen, because we don't have the exact rules of this universe, I don't know if maybe some character is not going to go back from the dead, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know what are our limitations here. And I think this makes things a little less impactful, but I am excited to see how they will deal with both the supernatural and skeptical sides in the show moving forward in season 3 and later seasons if we get them. I hope we do. There's also a lot of criticisms thrown at the adult storyline, and I completely understand it for a few reasons. First of all is that when you have the characters as adults, kind of kills the tension, because we know who is alive now, we know who is not going to die, and they managed to not have this cutting of tension in the first season because we didn't know all of the characters who were supposed to be alive and the ones who were not, but they killed it completely by season 2 by showing all the characters who survived. Also, yes, the adult plotlines sometimes feel a little boring because they are so disconnected from what is going on in the interesting world of the wild. And yeah, I agree with that, even though I like the little comical relief it brings sometimes. But yeah, I do support the existence of the adult timeline, but we need it with better writing. I support it because I think it's interesting. It builds on the themes about how the wilderness, whether it's the supernatural force or just trauma, is lingering, and I think this is interesting, and I like to see the changes the characters had in their mentality about the wilderness in the present timeline. I think this is interesting, but it needs better writing. But there's plenty I love about the adult storyline. Like, I love Melanie Linsky ever since I watched Ever After 1998, where she plays the nice stepsister of Cinderella, aka Danielle, aka Drew Barrymore. I love this movie so much. I love Christina Ricci as adult Misty so much. She's so funny. And when answering the theories about whether the show is supernatural or not, one of the creators of the show, Bart Nickerson, said this. I'm going to read what he said. It is almost a kind of a, I have no idea how to say this, roars catch. I'm not going to attempt. Test in a way, because regardless of what you think, there is a phenomenology of a kind of possession, like a thing that some people experience. And then obviously, depending on the lens that you are viewing it through, some people call it psychosis, some people call it a demonic possession. There's a continuum of interpretations between those 2 points, Nickerson says. And then I think there's also a metaphysical question about what it means for something to be real. Like, what would it mean for a demon to be real? And so I think a lot of those things can be a part of the interpretation of what is actually happening with the supernatural. So basically, he said a lot of really difficult words because he doesn't want to answer the question. No, I'm kidding. I think you can understand what he means. And okay, guys, while I was watching the show, I actually took a few notes that were kind of dumb, and I had no reason to talk about them in the rest of this video, so I'm just going to talk about them now, because I don't think I'll ever get a chance to make such a long video about Yellowjackets. I thought this was going to be really longer. Like, my raw footage is 2 hours and 20 minutes. The raw footage of my zombies video was 5 hours long. I thought this was going to be longer. But yeah, anyway, some notes. First of all, there's so many freezing out foreshadowing moments, because as you guys know, Jackie dies by freezing, and there are so many moments where they talk about freezing or cold in relation to Jackie, like, you want to freeze her out, I'm so cold. There are so many of these moments. I didn't count all of them, but these are some of them. That was interesting foreshadowing that I noticed. Adam's biggest crime was being into MILFs. Okay, inconsistency here, guys. In episode 10 of season 1, Taissa tells Van that Van believes that Sporty Spice is the most underrated Spice Girl. She is the best singer. She is my favorite Spice Girl. I'm sorry, I'm passionate about this. But anyway, the point is, she says that, but this is not possible because according to context clues, the plane crash happened in late May 1996. And Wannabe, the first Spice Girl song, was released in the UK in June 26, 1996. The minute they began talking about that, I was like, there's no way the Spice Girls had already happened. They don't know the Spice Girls. And yeah, they don't, especially because Wannabe was released in the US in January 1997. They wouldn't know the Spice Girls yet. Yeah, the show has a really great soundtrack. There are many moments where I really like the song they play when Ben tells Ned that he's gay is Fade Into You, which is a song I love. They also play Dreams by the Cranberries when they go into the lake, which is great because I love Dreams. I have it on my wall. Also, Free, and I think Choreomania or Dream Girl Evil, I don't remember exactly. These songs play in season 2 by Florence and the Machine, and I love these songs, so that was really fun. And so yeah, this is something I just wanted to talk about. Great soundtrack. I don't know how to translate this. It's a little joke I made. If you're Brazilian, you will get this and maybe find it funny. Jane Widdop, who plays Larlie, was in my favorite awful twin movie. I want to make a video about this movie, Jessica Darling's Hit List. I love this awful movie. And they played Hope, who was the new best friend for the main character, Jessica Darling, who's played by Chloe East. And Chloe East was in the movie Heretic with Sophie Thatcher, who plays Nat in Yellowjackets. You see, same person. So basically, I wonder if Sophie Thatcher talked to Chloe East about it being in a show with Jane Widdop, and I hope she can, bridge the gap so we can have a Jessica Darling's A-list cast reunion. I want that. And yeah, this is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Not gonna lie, I was super terrified of making this video because this was such a detailed oriented video that I'm really scared that I missed really important things or like misunderstood really important things. So feel free to comment if I had any inconsistencies on what I said or if my theories make no sense. I'm excited to hear your thoughts and your own theories. Please comment that. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry for not posting for a while. I'll see you guys soon. I'm hoping to make more videos this year, although my life is going to be a little crazy. I am transferring colleges again, third time. No, I'm lying. It's my second time transferring colleges, and I'm going to move probably. So this is going to take a while, but I am going to quit my job probably. So, but I'm going to have more class time. So I have no idea how my schedule is going to be like. I have no idea how I'll be able to post more. Happy New Year's. I hope I'll be able to post more in 2025. It was one of my New Year's resolution to revive this channel, to post it more frequently. I love making videos. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon, I hope. Not next week. Next week I'm going on a trip. I think I'm going to vlog stuff, and I'll see if I find anything interesting for it to be an actual video. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. I will make a part 2 when season 3, when I watch the entirety of season 3, as I said. And I'll see you guys very soon, as Taylor Swift in The Story of Us would say, the end. Bye. Bye. Oh my god, my throat hurts. I didn't bring any water. That was a mistake. Bye. Do you guys like my outfit? I wanted to do it like a little Jackie Taylor inspired of cannibalism. And Shauna is so good looking here. She's so pretty. Anyway, that's not the point. Testando. ¿Será que el som está funcionando? Ah! Please ignore the mess in my bedroom. Is all I'm going to ask. It's getting so dark. My sister, who is a history major, might explain this better. I think this is Greek inspired. It's a bacchanal. I don't know how to say this in English, but it's a festival dedicated to Dionysus, I think, where there's like a feast